Did you ever think money heists were just something you only see in movies and TV? That's probably because you've never heard of the heist of the century, a complex, daring operation in France that led to the theft of $20 million and saw a crew of thieves hiding in the vault for at least 27 hours. How did it happen? That's the question everyone asks the moment they realize their valuables were anything but secure. It all started in Nice, France, at a branch of one of the world's most famous banks, Société Générale. On the morning of Monday, July 19, 1976, everything seemed as usual. The bank's director and staff took their seats, ready for a routine day. Customers lined up outside, waiting to access their valuables. As the director approached the vault to prepare for transactions, he unlocked the outer door with ease. But then, nothing. The inner vault door refused to budge. Was it just a jam? After all, this wasn't the first time the vault door had been stubborn. This steel giant, over 75 years old and weighing more than 20 tons, had been known to get stuck before. So the bank staff remained calm. They assumed the lock would give way soon enough. Unfortunately, this wasn't just another ordinary case. The director quickly called the vault's manufacturer for assistance. Within minutes, a representative arrived and began the unlocking procedure. Try as he might, he couldn't find anything wrong with the lock mechanism. It was in perfect working order. So why wouldn't the door open? Frustration grew among the staff, and anxiety started spreading through the growing crowd of customers outside. They wanted access to their valuables, but no one could explain what was wrong. Was it possible that the door had somehow been locked from the inside? That would be impossible, wouldn't it? After all, the vault only had one entrance. Hours passed and finally a decision was made to drill through the side of the vault. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only option left. By 3 p.m., after hours of careful drilling, a small hole was finally created. As the bank employees peered inside, they were met with an astonishing sight. The vault had been cleared out. How could this have happened? When the police arrived, they made the opening larger, revealing the full extent of the theft. Nearly everything inside the vault was gone, including the contents of hundreds of private safe boxes filled with money, jewelry, and other valuables. And on one of the vault walls, written in bold letters, was a taunting message. Without weapons, without violence, without hate. It was clear this was no ordinary robbery. The detectives knew they were dealing with a mastermind. But who could have orchestrated something so elaborate? And how did they manage to break into the vault without setting off any alarms? As detectives surveyed the scene, they couldn't help but feel that the robbers had left a trail, not by accident, but as part of their message. First, there was that bold phrase painted on the vault wall in large letters: without weapons, without violence, without hate. But what kind of criminal group leaves a message like that? Only a group that wanted to make a statement, misfits who wanted to prove they could pull off the impossible without a single act of aggression. And as investigators combed through the vault, more clues emerged. Scattered across the vault's floor were tools of the trade, as if they'd been left behind as trophies of the operation. There were blowtorches fueled by an astonishing 27 gas cylinders, as well as half a mile of electrical cable, which had powered ventilators and lights to keep the air circulating in the cramped tunnel they had dug. But these weren't ordinary robbers either. They had even left empty food containers, evidence of a meal eaten right there in the vault. This was no hurried heist. The robbers had dined like kings in the very place they'd stolen from. They were confident, perhaps too confident. With all the clues in hand, detectives faced an obvious question. Who were these daring thieves? It was clear that whoever was behind the heist was no amateur. The precision, the confidence, and the scale of the operation all pointed to something bigger. So who had the nerve and the skill to pull this off? The clues seemed to lead to a well-known gang called the Sewer Rats, infamous for their ability to vanish without a trace. But why the Sewer Rats? What made this gang capable of such a massive, coordinated operation? The Rats had made a name for themselves by navigating the dark, maze-like sewer systems under cities, pulling off small but clever heists where they always managed to slip away undetected. However, this heist was different. It was too big to ignore and carried all the marks of a major operation. But could they really be behind this? After all, pulling off something of this scale wasn't just about having a clever escape route. It required patience, precision, and an in-depth knowledge of both the bank and the city's underground systems. The rats were notorious for being disciplined and adaptable, with a skill set tailored for exactly this type of job. If they were behind this operation, they had clearly been planning for months, maybe even years. Detectives discovered that the thieves had mapped out Nice's sewer system and identified the precise spot to dig a tunnel, bringing them within just a few feet of the vault wall. This 30-foot tunnel was no minor feat. It cut through dense concrete right under one of the city's busiest streets, and the rats had timed their work carefully to avoid any suspicion from passers-by. But how did they manage it without drawing attention? They had it all figured out. The rats organized themselves into shifts, with each team working in 10-minute bursts before taking a break. They had to battle cramped tunnels, stifling heat, and poor ventilation. To keep things going, they even rotated in a doctor for emergencies. Then there was their brilliant escape. When detectives noticed a small hole leading from the vault to a dark, damp passageway, they realized the vault hadn't just been emptied. The thieves had disappeared without a trace. The tunnel connected to the city's sewer system, their hidden pathway in and out of the bank. The gang had vanished into the underground maze, only to emerge far from the bank, seamlessly blending into the streets of Nice as if nothing had happened. These thieves were no ordinary gang. They were more like a well-trained military unit, with every move meticulously thought out and executed. With so many fragments of evidence in their hands, detectives were left with a daunting task: to catch them. But how? Their first move was to keep a close watch on known associates of the Sewer Rats gang. In particular, detectives kept an eye on members who had recently spent a little too much cash or displayed a new taste for luxury. Their instincts were right. Over time, they noticed unusual behavior in certain suspects. Some were spending more freely, and others seemed to move more cautiously than usual, almost as if they knew they were being watched. After weeks of surveillance, the breakthrough finally came. It was the first week of October when two men under watch walked into a local bank carrying something that raised suspicions: gold ingots. When one of the men tried to sell the gold, an alert bank employee noticed something odd. He checked the serial numbers and immediately realized they matched those of gold stolen from the Société Générale vault. The employee discreetly alerted the police, and within moments, officers were on the scene. The two men were taken into custody with their fates sealed by the stolen gold in their possession. Now detectives had a foothold in the case. With the two men in custody, they were ready to push for answers. Who was behind this massive operation? Under pressure, one of the suspects gave up a name: Albert Spaggiari. He claimed that this quiet photographer from the countryside was the mastermind behind the heist of the century. The police were stunned. Could it really be Albert, a man known as a simple photographer, a devoted husband, and a countryside romantic? Still, they had to pursue the lead. As they dug deeper into Albert's life, his involvement began to make much more sense. Detectives quickly discovered that Albert had rented a safe deposit box at the Société Générale months before the heist. He'd gained access to the vault multiple times under the guise of a customer securing valuables. But as they uncovered more, it was clear he'd been doing much more than safeguarding belongings. Witnesses reported seeing him with a camera during his visits to the vault, casually photographing the walls, floors, and layout as if on a mission. It was subtle, but the more detectives pieced together, the more they saw the beginnings of a meticulous plan. Albert's quiet countryside lifestyle could easily have been a cover, a way to keep the authorities from suspecting him. Friends and neighbors described him as charming and romantic, yet with a fiercely private side. He had even reportedly boasted about a big project he was working on, though no one had ever imagined it would be something like this. Finally, with enough evidence in hand, the police took Albert into custody. When they brought him in for questioning, Albert's calm demeanor threw everyone off. He seemed almost amused, as though the whole ordeal was just another routine day. His polite denials were firm, but they left detectives feeling uneasy. How could a man involved in such a massive operation remain so composed? But the detectives were prepared to push hard. As the questioning continued, they brought up his wife, hinting that she could be implicated because of the illegal weapons and explosives they had found at their cottage. The threat struck a nerve. Albert's calm exterior began to crack. The idea of his wife facing prison time for his actions was too much. Desperate to protect her, he finally gave in and started to talk. Albert confessed that he was, indeed, the mastermind behind the heist. He explained how he had first learned of the vault's lack of an alarm system from a neighbor who worked at the bank. Inspired, he rented a safe deposit box, which allowed him regular access to the vault's interior without raising suspicion. With his camera, he documented every corner and cranny of the vault, noting all the possible entry and exit points. It was then that he realized the sewer system was the perfect way in and out of the vault. But Albert didn't work alone. To pull off such an elaborate plan, he enlisted the help of the sewer rats. With their experience in navigating dark, cramped sewer systems, Albert knew they were the perfect partners. Together, they plotted and executed each phase of the heist with military precision. Finally, after a lot of speculation, the authorities had their man, or so they thought. Albert still had one final trick up his sleeve. While awaiting trial, he and his lawyer had regular meetings with the judge to discuss his case. Albert played along, acting cooperative, answering questions, and behaving as though he were resigned to his fate. Then one Thursday afternoon, Albert seized an opportunity that no one saw coming. He met with the judge as usual, calmly discussing the heist and explaining each phase of the plan in detail. To clarify his points, Albert even drew maps of the sewer system and his digging routes. Standing over the judge's desk, he used the map to show the entry and exit points, gesturing as if giving a history lesson. Then, as the judge leaned in to follow Albert's finger on the map, Albert turned his gaze to the window. And suddenly, with the confidence of a man who had been planning his escape all along, Albert made his move. He sprang toward the open window, vaulted through it, and landed with a solid thud on the roof of a parked car. Before the judge and his lawyer even had time to react, Albert's accomplice was there, waiting for him on a motorcycle. Albert jumped on the back, and the two sped away into the streets of Nice. By the time anyone in the courtroom fully realized what had happened, Albert had disappeared, vanishing into the city as quickly as he'd planned the heist itself. Incredibly, Albert was never captured again. He spent the rest of his life in hiding, sending taunting letters and photos to police and the press, reveling in his freedom and mocking those who tried to hunt him down. Although he remained a fugitive, he famously mailed $600 to the owner of the car whose roof he'd landed on, the ultimate proof of his bold, audacious style and sensible spirit. For the detectives, the case remained open-ended. They had caught the mastermind, only to lose him again in the blink of an eye. And for Albert, his legacy as the architect of the heist of the century was complete.